She only married him for the money. The words cut through the funeral home like a knife. Diane, my mother-in-law, said it loud enough for everyone to hear. I was standing right there, holding the polished wooden box containing Owen's ashes. 50 people turned to stare at me. Some looked shocked. Others nodded like they'd suspected it all along. I felt heat crawl up my neck and settle in my cheeks. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched the box tighter. But I didn't speak. I didn't defend myself. I didn't cry or shout or make a scene. Instead, I watched Diane dab at her dry eyes with a tissue, performing grief for an audience that believed every word she said. She thought this was her moment of triumph. She had no idea what was coming in exactly 30 minutes. My grief for Owen was real. So real it felt like drowning. But my restraint was equally real. I had learned over 5 years of marriage that reacting to Diane only gave her power. So I stood silent beside my husband's remains while his mother painted me as a gold digger to everyone we knew. I watched her fake sobs, her theatrical dabbing of perfectly dry eyes. This funeral had become her performance. She had orchestrated every detail, insisting on specific flowers, specific readings, specific people to speak. She had turned Owen's death into a stage for her own drama. And through it all, I said nothing. Because I knew something she didn't. Owen had known exactly what kind of person his mother was. And he had planned accordingly. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, cleared his throat and announced that we would be reading Owen's will in 30 minutes at his office next door. As per Owen's specific request, he added, looking directly at me. Diane's face lit up with a smile that made my stomach turn. She glanced at Owen's Rolex, which had been returned to her temporarily for the funeral display. I saw her fingers brush against it possessively. She assumed it would be hers to keep. That was her first mistake. She also assumed the lake cabin, the investment portfolio, the savings accounts, everything would flow to her as Owen's mother. She had spent 5 years telling me I wasn't really family. Now she would learn what Owen actually thought about that. I followed everyone to the lawyer's office, my heart steady despite the chaos around me. I flashed back to our wedding rehearsal dinner 5 years ago. Diane had waited until Owen stepped away to take a phone call. Then she leaned close to me, her breath smelling of expensive wine, and whispered, "You'll never be good enough for him. You know that, right?" I had frozen, unsure how to respond. When Owen returned, I considered telling him. But he was so happy, so excited about our wedding. I stayed quiet. That silence cost us both more than I knew at the time. Because Diane took my silence as permission to continue. For 5 years, she made comments about my background, my education, my career. Nothing I did was ever good enough. And Owen, caught between his mother and his wife, often said nothing. Until 6 months ago, when everything changed. About a year into our marriage, Diane had tried something more direct. She called Owen into her study during a family dinner and suggested he have me sign a post-nuptial agreement. She claimed it was just to protect the family assets. Owen told me about it later that night, his face tight with anger. I wanted to sign it, to prove I wasn't after his money. But Owen refused to even consider it. He told his mother no in a way that left no room for argument. That was the first time I saw Diane's careful mask crack. She had stared at me across the dinner table with pure hatred in her eyes. She had expected Owen to choose her. Instead, he chose me. That refusal had set something in motion. Diane spent the next 4 years trying to drive a wedge between us. Back in the present, I sat in the lawyer's waiting room. Diane was surrounded by her sister and Owen's cousin. Both sipping wine from fancy glasses like this was a social event. They laughed about something, their voices too loud for a law office. I sat alone on the opposite side of the room, quiet and still. I let the silence wrap around me like armor. Other family members filtered in, giving me awkward glances. Some seemed sympathetic. Others looked at me with the same judgment Diane had planted. I didn't try to win them over. I simply waited. The conference room doors opened, and Mr. Harrison gestured for everyone to enter. Diane swept in first, already claiming the best seat. I took a chair in the back corner. And waited. Everyone settled into their seats. Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses and opened a leather portfolio. He began with the standard legal language. Debts to be settled, taxes to be handled, a few charitable donations Owen had specified. Diane rolled her eyes like she was bored, drumming her manicured nails on the mahogany table. She was clearly waiting for the important part. The part where she inherited everything and proved to everyone that blood was thicker than marriage. The cousin beside her whispered something, and they both smiled. Mr. Harrison continued reading in his measured, professional voice. And then his tone shifted slightly. He glanced at me, then at Diane. To my mother, Diane Patterson, he read slowly, I left exactly $1 and a copy of this recording. The room went completely silent. Mr. Harrison reached into his portfolio and pulled out a small digital recorder. He placed it in the center of the table and pressed play. Owen's voice filled the room, clear and strong. The voice I would never hear again except in recordings. Mom, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. And it means you're still the same person you've always been. Diane started to rise from her chair, her face flushing red. Mr. Harrison held up one hand. Please remain seated. This is legally binding testimony. Owen's voice continued. You were never going to love anyone I chose. But Ellie isn't after my money. She's the only person who's ever made me feel like I was enough without it. Diane grabbed the arms of her chair. Her knuckles turned white. Everyone else sat frozen, barely breathing. Owen's recorded voice kept going. I knew what you said to her at our rehearsal dinner. Ellie told me years later. You said she'd never be good enough. But the truth is, you've never thought anyone was good enough. Not my friends, not my choices, not even me unless I did exactly what you wanted. Diane's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide how pale she had become. Her sister reached over to touch her arm, but Diane jerked away. Ellie stayed with me because she loved me. She worked 2 jobs to help pay for my medical bills when insurance wouldn't cover everything. She never asked for anything. She just loved me. The room was so quiet I could hear people breathing. Several of Owen's relatives were staring at Diane now with expressions of shock. Diane exploded out of her chair. This is fake. She manipulated him into recording this. She probably wrote the whole script. Her voice cracked with panic and rage. Mr. Harrison calmly pulled out a document and slid it across the table to her. This will was signed and notarized 6 months ago, in the presence of 3 witnesses, all of whom will testify that Owen was of sound mind and acted without coercion. The witnesses' names are listed here. Diane grabbed the paper, her hands shaking. She read the names. Her face went from red to white. She knew it was real. Everyone in the room knew it was real. Owen had planned this 6 months before the car accident that killed him. He had known exactly what his mother would do at his funeral. And he had prepared for it. Mr. Harrison continued reading. To my wife, Ellie Patterson, I leave everything else. The house at 847, Riverside Drive. All savings accounts. All investment portfolios. The lake cabin we always talked about renovating. My Rolex watch. My car. Everything I own becomes hers, without restriction or condition. I hadn't asked for any of this. Owen and I had talked about the will, yes, but I had never pushed for details. We had planned for our future together, not for his death. I had assumed most things would go to me with some provisions for his mother. I never imagined this. But now, sitting in that conference room watching Diane's face crumble, it felt like justice. Not revenge. Justice. Owen had protected me even after death from the woman who had tried to destroy our marriage. But Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. There's one more provision. Owen requested that his life insurance policy, totaling $400,000, be placed in a trust. The trust is designated for a child, should Ellie choose to have one. If she chooses not to, or cannot, the funds will be donated to the children's hospital where Owen volunteered. My throat tightened. I hadn't known about this. Owen and I had talked about having children someday, but we'd agreed to wait. He had never mentioned setting aside money for a child we didn't have yet. Tears burned behind my eyes for the first time that day. This wasn't just protection from his mother. This was love. Pure, thoughtful, generous love. A quiet lump formed in my throat that I couldn't swallow away. After the reading, the atmosphere in the room had completely shifted. People no longer looked at me with judgment or suspicion. Instead, they stared at Diane with shock and disappointment. Owen's boss, a kind man named Harold who had always treated me warmly, approached me as people filed out. He always said you kept him grounded, he told me quietly. Said you were the best decision he ever made. I thanked him, my voice barely steady. Meanwhile, Diane couldn't even meet my eyes. She gathered her purse with shaking hands while her sister tried to comfort her. But even her sister looked uncertain now, like she was seeing Diane clearly for the first time. The cousin who had been laughing earlier slipped out without saying goodbye to anyone. The performance was over. And Diane had lost her audience. I flashed back to a confrontation from a year before Owen died. Diane had shown up at our house unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon. Owen was at work. She walked into our kitchen without knocking and found me making dinner. She looked around our modest but comfortable home with obvious disdain. "You're lucky," she said, her tone making it clear that luck was all I had. "Men like Owen don't stay in love long. Especially not with women like you." Something in me snapped that day. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. She went on for 10 minutes about how I wasn't sophisticated enough, educated enough, wealthy enough. I saved that recording. I never used it or told Owen about it. But I still had it, safely stored in 3 different places. 2 weeks after the funeral, Diane filed a legal claim contesting the will. Her argument was that I had manipulated Owen during his final months, that he had been under emotional distress following his father's death 2 years earlier, that the will didn't reflect his true wishes. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, the same man who had prepared Owen's will, took on my defense personally. He was calm and thorough. He presented emails between Owen and himself dating back 8 months, showing clear intent and careful planning. He showed text messages between Owen and his friends where Owen discussed the will openly. He provided testimony from the 3 witnesses. Diane's case fell apart in less than 2 weeks. The judge dismissed it with barely concealed irritation, noting that frivolous claims wasted the court's time and resources. The same cousins and neighbors who had whispered about me at the funeral began to change their tune. Some stopped speaking to Diane entirely. One of Owen's cousins, a woman named Beatrice who had avoided me at the funeral, sent me a message apologizing. "I never knew how toxic she was," she wrote. "Owen tried to tell us, but we didn't listen. We thought he was just being dramatic. I'm so sorry." I read the message 3 times but never responded. I didn't need to. The vindication I felt wasn't about winning people over. It was about truth finally being visible. Diane had spent 5 years controlling the narrative about me. Now the real story was out, and I didn't need to say a word. Owen had said it all for me from beyond the grave. His voice had been more powerful than anything I could have said in my own defense. 3 weeks after the will reading, Diane showed up at my door. I saw her through the peephole, standing on my porch with an envelope in her hand. I didn't open the door. I simply watched her through the small glass circle. She knocked 3 times, then waited. When I didn't answer, she bent down and slipped a handwritten letter under the door. I heard her footsteps retreat down the walkway. After her car pulled away, I picked up the envelope. Inside were 2 pages of cramped handwriting. "You've destroyed this family," it began. "You turned my son against me. You poisoned his mind. You took everything that should have been mine." I read it once, then started laughing. I couldn't help it. The family she claimed I destroyed was a family she had controlled through guilt and manipulation. The family that now wanted nothing to do with her was rejecting her toxicity, not my presence. 2 months after the funeral, I received a call from Mr. Harrison. "There's something else," he said, his voice careful. "Owen had a second savings account that wasn't listed in the primary will because he set it up differently. It's in a trust specifically for you, labeled for Ellie's dreams." I went to his office that afternoon. He showed me the account balance. $153,000. I stared at the number, unable to process it. Owen had been saving for years, putting aside money without telling me. The trust document included a note in his handwriting. "No conditions. No restrictions. Whatever makes you happy." I wept in Mr. Harrison's office, unable to hold back anymore. This wasn't just protection from his mother. This was Owen believing in me, in my dreams, in my future. Even after death, he was taking care of me. I visited Owen's grave on a cold afternoon in late autumn. The headstone was simple, the way he would have wanted. I brought a folding chair and Diane's letter. I sat beside his grave and read the whole thing out loud, including her most vicious accusations. Then I told him about the will reading, about Diane's failed lawsuit, about the secret account he'd left for my dreams. I imagined him laughing at his mother's letter. "You've destroyed this family," I repeated, shaking my head. "No," I said to his headstone. "She did. All I did was survive her." I stayed at the cemetery for 2 hours, just sitting with him. When I finally left, I felt lighter. Not happy, not yet. But lighter. Like I could finally start breathing again without his mother's poison in the air. 3 months after Owen's death, I received a job offer. A marketing position in Portland, Oregon. It was a significant step up from my current job, with better pay and real growth potential. Before Owen died, I would have turned it down immediately. I would have worried about leaving the familiar, about starting over, about what people would think. But now, staring at the offer letter, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. I had nothing tying me to this town anymore except memories. And I could take those with me. I called the company back and accepted the position. I gave notice at my current job, started packing up the house, and began planning my move across the country. I was starting over. And for the first time in years, I was excited about my future. Word spread through our small town quickly. Diane had contested her son's will, insulted his widow at his funeral, and lost everything. Her church, where she had been a prominent member for 30 years, quietly asked her to step back from her volunteer positions. The community center where she had served on the board requested her resignation. Not because anyone was seeking revenge on my behalf, but because people were embarrassed to be associated with her. The mask had finally fallen completely away, and the person underneath was someone nobody wanted to defend. I heard about her downfall through mutual acquaintances, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no glee, not even pity. I was simply done with her. She had been given chance after chance to be kind. She had chosen cruelty every time. These were just consequences. For months after the funeral, Mr. Harrison called me again. Owen left one more letter. It's addressed to his mother. I sent it to her as he requested, with a 4-month delay. I don't know what it says. Owen sealed it himself. I never asked what was in that letter. But 2 weeks after Diane received it, she put her house up for sale. 1 week after that, she left town. Her sister told someone who eventually told me that Diane had moved to Arizona to live near her brother. She left without saying goodbye to anyone. Without settling her affairs properly. Just packed up and disappeared. Whatever Owen had written in that letter, it had broken something in her. I would never know what he said. But I suspected it was the truth she had spent her whole life running from. And finally, it had caught up with her. I drove to Owen's lake cabin one last time before moving to Portland. It was a small, rustic place about 2 hours from town. Owen and I had spent weekends there, planning renovations we would make someday. New windows, updated kitchen, maybe a deck facing the water. We had dreamed together in that cabin. Now it was mine, and I had to decide what to do with it. I brought paint samples and a bottle of wine. I spent the afternoon on the porch, drinking wine and imagining the changes I could make. The cabin didn't feel sad. It felt peaceful. Like Owen was still there somehow, in the quiet spaces between the trees and the gentle sound of water against the shore. I decided not to sell it. I would renovate it slowly, exactly as we'd planned. It would be my retreat. My connection to him. My reminder that love doesn't end just because life does. 6 months after Owen's death, I made another decision. I legally changed my name back to my maiden name, Ellie Brennan. It wasn't about bitterness or rejection of my marriage. I had loved being Ellie Patterson while Owen was alive. But now, starting this new chapter in Portland, I wanted to reclaim the person I had been before. The person who had gotten lost somewhere in 5 years of defending my worth to a woman who would never accept me. I still loved Owen. I always would. But I didn't want to live in anyone's shadow anymore, not even his. I wanted to be fully myself, standing in my own light. The name change felt like permission to do exactly that. I was Ellie Brennan again. And Ellie Brennan had dreams to chase. A year after Owen's death, I used part of the money from his secret account to open a small branding agency in Portland. I called it Second Light Creative, because after everything, I still believed in love, in legacy, and in the possibility of lighting up again after darkness. My first clients were small businesses owned by women, many of them starting over after divorces or loss. I understood them in ways I couldn't have before. Diane never contacted me after leaving town. She never apologized, never acknowledged what she had done. And I realized I didn't need her to. Her silence was its own admission of guilt. I didn't ruin her. Her greed and cruelty did. And I didn't fight for revenge. I fought for the truth and for the life Owen had wanted me to have. Standing in my new office, looking at the logo I'd designed with Owen's favorite colors, I realized something important. I had won. Not because Diane lost. But because I was finally, completely free.